Today we're talking about Western civilization.
This is the Jason Carson Show.
All right, guys, we're back. Thanks for being here. We have Jeremy Dolans with us today.
How's it going?
Hang out, talk for a while. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be great.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about Trump's speech in Poland. Warsaw. Did you get a chance to watch it?
I did.
What'd you think?
It was interesting. I think he had some valid points.
Mm-hmm.
I think some things, like Trump does, he'll say something and you're just like, that could have been better phrased. But
which is interesting about that is, like, yes, that's definitely something Trump does all the time. But I felt like for this speech, there was less of that.
There was.
As opposed to,
in my opinion,
as opposed to some of the things he said at the recent rally in Ohio. I don't know if you saw that. That was something. But anyway, yeah, lots of people have been saying that was a really great speech. Talked about Western civilization. That was on the 6th of July that he gave that speech. And yeah, we're going to have some sections that we're going to be playing for you. But there's also an article here from Salon that I want to read. So the first part of it says, Donald Trump continued to push forward his white nationalist agenda in Poland on Thursday in a speech that, as Sarah Wildman of Vox wrote, often resorted to rhetorical conceits typically used by the European and American alt-right. That is true, should hardly be worth debating. Trump argued that Western, read white, nations are the fastest and greatest community, and the world has never known anything like our community of nations. He crowed about Westerners, read white people. Write symphonies, pursue innovations, and always seek to explore and discover brand new frontiers, as if these were unique qualities to white-dominated nations, instead of universal truths of the human race across all cultures. He also portrayed this Western civilization as under assault from forces from the South or the East that threaten over time to undermine these values and erase the bonds of culture, faith, and tradition that make us who we are. So, yeah, that's what they said about that. So what's your initial thought here?
I don't know. I think I read the whole article.
Okay.
And I think there were some things farther down that they made some valid points about. But at the same time, I think even points they were making are accurate as to what Trump was trying to say. But I think Trump's points were valid in what was said.
Yeah, no, I do have some more things later from the article. Like,
right, okay.
It's not that they're necessarily lying about what he said.
No.
It's they're interpreting it a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Like, I think their interpretation of it is not up to the same interpretation I have of what Trump said.
Right.
And I think, for instance, where they mention that Trump, or that he was picturing only white civilization as having the ability to do things like create symphonies and so on. And they rebutted that with, we're not. I agree, we're not the only ones, but I don't necessarily think Trump thinks we're the only ones either.
Right.
He just wants to protect our ability to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's like you were saying, yeah, they're correctly talking about the things he's saying. They're just assuming motive from what he's saying. That's not at all what he's saying. When he says things like, the greatest, what did he say? Greatest community of nations the world has ever known. I mean, I don't necessarily argue that fact. Right? Western nations have brought the human race farther than any other nations in the history of the world.
Right.
But nobody said that was just because of the color of our skin.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I don't think Trump looks at it and he doesn't value the innovations that Egypt made. I mean, things we use today are based on what Egypt did. But I think the point to be made is that in this day and age we're in, Western civilization leads the world in innovation.
Yep.
And, I mean, let's be honest, you look at it and Asia, so China and Japan, they're coming up quickly alongside of us. And I don't think Trump would deny that fact. That when it comes to technological advances, that Japan and China don't equate high into the ability to meet that. And I don't think Trump's statement is saying that white civilization is all and was all and will be all that the world ever knows.
Right.
He's just pointing out that with this day and age, the advancements we have and the things we have are in place because of Western civilization.
Right. Right.
Not denying that Egypt was once great.
Yep.
And not saying that other countries can't one day be innovators above Western civilization. But he's just stating that for our day and age, we are running the world in innovation.
Right. Exactly. And it's not because of the color of our skin.
It's not.
So then, why is that though? Why have Western civilization and Western nations progressed the way they have? You know what I mean? How come so if you've got the whole world and you've got the West, and you see that the West has the greatest technological advancement of the whole world, then you break the West down, and what do you have? You have the United States of America, which has been around hasn't been around as long as all of them, right? But since 1776 to now, compared to the rest of essentially world history, you see this incredible increase and explosion in the way people live, right?
Right.
The quality of life and human rights and things like that. Why is that?
You know, you look at society, and society is driven. Innovation is driven by war. And you look at where a lot of modern countries come from as far as the history of Western civilization, and it all stems most of the time from Rome, right? And so Rome came in, was a warring power, created all these countries, and then that's where you begin to see countries start fracturing and becoming their own entities. The Roman Empire was really the last major continuous empire. You had the British Empire, but they were pretty fractured in where they had territories. But you look at that and you pull out of Rome's fall and everything, and you're into I can't remember who the rebel group that ended up.
The Visigoths.
Yeah. Thank you. I was going to say Byzantine, and I'm like, that's
something
right.
else. Yeah.
Visigoths take and kill Rome, and those are really barbarians from more of the western side of Rome's territory, and then they begin to come into power. You go into the Middle Ages, and you have all those conflicts, and war drives innovation. And so essentially, from there on, most of the conflict that takes place is driven by Western civilization, which means they're innovating at a higher rate.
That's interesting.
I don't think it's because they're more intelligent. I don't think it's because they have more resources. It's just they were in positions where they were driven to produce at a greater rate, utilizing the resources they have. And then that's where innovation comes in, and that's where great things come from. I mean, modern medicine today can be traced back directly to World War I.
Really? Yeah.
So, I mean, before then, you didn't have vaccines, you didn't have x-rays, you didn't have antidotes to a lot of things. But post-World War I, you have x-rays, you have vaccines, you have blood transfusions, and all that stuff that starts coming out of one war.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Modern weaponry, different tactics. And you do that, World War I and World War II, biggest conflicts of the 20th century. And there you go. That's where almost everything we have today is from. And
that's interesting, yeah.
Computer technology, all is from the space race, which again, Russia and the United States.
So not only just war, but conflict.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Your need to be greater than others to remain in a safe proximity or an ability to defend yourself.
So then, but how would you contrast that against fall of Roman Empire? You know, basically Europe breaks up into a bunch of nations, and they've been warring ever since then, and conquering each other. But then you have 1776, the founding of the United States, and other than Manifest Destiny taking over the rest of the across the continent from the Native Americans, what wars have we fought that were actually quote, building an empire, or conquest, that kind of mindset? You know what I mean?
Right.
Constructive. if the United States were operating like just like any other Western nation after the fall of Rome, why is Canada still there? You know what I mean? I mean, really.
Yeah.
So, if it's different in that sense, and it's the greatest of the Western nations, why is that?
You know, I think the founding fathers were looking for a place not to create a race from and to dominate from, but a place where they could come and be who they wanted to be, right? I don't think the purpose of the United States was to have a starting point. It was to be what they desired it to be in and of itself, and not to conquer or overthrow or rule the world. The desire was for it never to be an empire. And there's actually several founding fathers who said that, that the United States was not to be an empire. They didn't want it to be an empire. They just wanted it to be a place where they could be, worship, and do what they wanted to. And I think that in and of itself is why a lot of what we involved in later on was more of a defensive mindset, and not a let's take over territories, things like that. You
can argue against U.S. foreign policy if you want to, but you also have to recognize the fact that we've been, the greatest peacekeeping nation ever. Right? We're not conquering the world like all of the other ones.
Right.
Or being conquered. Yeah.
Who knows how we got to a place where few to nobody challenge our position on the territory we possess.
Right.
But somehow nobody comes to us and says, hey, that's our land. But then you look at Palestine and Israel, and that's all it is warring over whose is it.
Right.
And like that's a lot of the conflicts that take place is just warring over whose territory is it. And somehow the United States came in and we removed a people from the land to a point where there's not a body large enough to fight the idea that this is our land.
Right.
Which, I don't necessarily condone, but at the same time, that's the reason we are where we are, and nobody challenges our authority on the land we hold.
That's really interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's about right. Why don't we take a break real fast, and we will be right back. All right, we're back. Still talking about Western civilization. So a couple of points that we've been going over. It's undeniable that Western nations have had the greatest improvements in human quality of life ever has been. Right?
I don't know about ever has been.
Or ever has been in modern history, at least.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
I would say at least since AD.
Right. We've also discussed that that's not because of skin color. And, I mean, honestly, Western nations aren't necessarily even white. Haven't been for a long time. So then, what makes them different? What about their culture is different? And are all cultures equal? Or can your culture be better than someone else's?
What are you defining as a culture?
Well, it's a good question. Western civilization and the principles it was founded on. You can argue about whether or not we're anywhere near what they are, now in our modern culture in the United States or in Europe and everywhere. But things like Christianity, essentially, is the bedrock of Western culture and Western civilization. So, I mean, a culture based off of Christianity as opposed to a culture based off of communism, right? Okay. Trump talks about in his speech the specter of communism that took over Russia and Eastern Europe, and the way that those people had to fight against that was to hold to their faith. Right? So, and that's something that I feel like a lot of people are attacking. Anyone who supports their culture and supports traditional values of the West is labeled a white nationalist or a white supremacist, right? What's that all about? Why?
So I think whenever your culture's ideologies or beliefs are challenged, that's when you will find the mudslinging. And so I think what you're finding in societies today is this inability to listen. And so I think that's why these terms, these phrases are thrown out so liberally. And I think from both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I think Christians throw out mud as much as other groups. And I think the reason being is people are taking things personally when really it's someone just standing their ground. I think you're no longer allowed to stand your ground if it offends someone. And I think that's the flaw. And I think that's the flaw in, it's not just on the left side. I think the right does it just as much as the left. I believe there are people I've met on the left who are very respectful people. But then there's also people who are not. And I think on the right, I meet people who are very respectful people, and then there are people who are not. And I think that's just where you're at as a society as a whole across the globe. It's, you're not allowed to hold an opinion and to stand your ground if it offends someone.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the danger zone. Because then that means I have to come out swinging, because if I'm going to offend you, I got to knock you out hard and fast, because you can't then come back at me. And so essentially what it starts everything off with immediate mindset of, you're going to disagree, so I have to counter all your disagreements before I can even state the legitimacy of mine. And so essentially it's no longer, hey, let's talk. It's, let me cut you down before you can cut me down. And that's the mindset of it. And I think that's where you find the slurs. And that's why you'll hear things like Trump's speech called white supremacy, because essentially they're trying to stop in its tracks before he hits them too hard. So it's just, everything's about countering and not about allowing someone to speak and be heard. Okay.
But that at the same time, these people do inherently believe what they're saying.
Right, which isn't wrong. Right.
Oh, well, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Well, not that they hold the belief.
It's not wrong that, well, I mean, I respect their right to hold the belief. Right. I just don't respect their belief.
Okay.
They're wrong to hold it.
Right, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Right. But yeah, even though it might just be simply out of absolutely, I agree with you, a context of people just constantly hitting each other back and forth and not actually caring about the truth. In a sense, they do. In a sense, they do believe what he's saying. Right. There's been a paradigm shift. Take yourself back to the Cold War and Ronald Reagan, and standing up for Western civilization. Nobody questioned that. Everyone was on board. Right. Republicans and Democrats, left and right, totally on board with that. And now, so many people are against it. That's I guess what I'm getting at. Why do people inherently hate Western civilization like this? They see what Western civilization is and what people profess it to be, and view that as white supremacy. Right? Regardless of how they throw mud at each other or talk about it, but it's the way they view it. Why is that?
I think part of it comes from a misunderstanding of intention. I mean, if, in all honesty, if we're going to hold to what was thought of as the reality of what the United States would be back when it was founded, we wouldn't have allowed anyone, Irish, German, any of those other, like, our whole starting philosophy was that there was going to be no interjection of the United States into anything outside of our borders.
Right.
So essentially, we were founded by immigrants, but at the same time, if we stuck to what was the original concept, we wouldn't have immigrants at all.
Well, I don't know about if that's necessarily true.
Yeah, and I mean, like, immigrants coming, but we would have had a lot of structured acceptance of them because we were concerned about protecting what was, if that makes sense. And then you progress, and we get bigger as a country. You see more and more nations coming in, and then you get into the slave trade, right? And now you've got different nationalities coming over as a trade.
As forced immigration.
Forced immigration. And then you get to the end, and we free all of them, and, you know, Lincoln wants to send them back. But that was his concept of what he thought
preserving the United States was.
And yeah, it sounds harsh. I don't agree with that as a concept. You force them to come over, so you find a place for them to live. Don't make them suffer because of your bad decisions to begin with.
Right.
But then you get farther in society, and I think you look at the United States at where it's at now, and we are an open country. We desire people to be a part of what is the United States. But at the same time, we have to conserve what is the United States.
That's really interesting, yeah.
And I think what Trump's saying is accurate. Like, if we want to make sure the United States is and will be what we desire it to be, then that means we can't just open up everything and just let people come in, because then there's no checks and balances to that in a way. If people are coming in without us having an ability to know who they are, then we're putting ourselves at risk.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say I know the best way to do that, but at the same time, I think it's a valid concern that in Western civilization, we have to be cautious of who's coming in.
Right.
And we have to be cautious of who's in already. I think there are extremists who are white that are going to cause detrimental damage to a country if we're not careful of them and what they're doing.
Sure.
I don't think it has to do with color. I just think
it has to do with ideology.
Exactly.
Yeah. So essentially, the example of protecting your culture in a bad way is what Lincoln did with the blacks after the Civil War, or was going to do, wanted to do. That's a perfect example of how it shouldn't be handled.
Right.
Right. I think you see the same kind of examples in modern Islamic countries.
Yeah.
Right? They want to preserve their culture, and they do it by killing everybody who's not a Muslim. It's probably very effective, but it's not right.
No.
Why?
Right.
Inherently, wanting to preserve your culture is in a sense amoral. It's completely based off what your culture is.
Right.
Right? So wanting to protect and preserve traditional Western culture is good. Because traditional Western culture is good. Because it's brought forth the greatest amount of human liberty, which has led to the greatest amount of quality of life. So, when it comes to things like he's talking about immigration from people from Muslim nations and things like that, you should be able to immigrate people from any country, regardless of what their skin tone is.
Exactly.
Unless what they inherently believe is contrary to what your civilization is set up on.
Right.
Right? If your civilization is the good one.
Right. Which, then again, is still, in and of itself, a perception. So, Muslims would think their culture is the good one.
Yes.
Now...
They're wrong.
Yes. In our viewpoint, they are wrong.
And also according to what is real.
Right. And what Scripture says and all that. Absolutely. They're wrong.
Yes.
But from the viewpoint of society, we have no greater foothold to say we're right over them. That's
other than the fact that our civilization has brought forth the greatest amount of human liberty and the greatest amount of. That's my point.
Right, and like
Right.
your point's valid, but like essentially that's what this author of the article is saying.
Yes.
Is that we don't have the right to hold that viewpoint.
Right.
Which I disagree with.
Yeah, we absolutely have that right.
We have that right.
That viewpoint. Yeah.
We have brought forth the greatest liberty that the world has ever seen. We have created a society that allows you to pursue what you want to pursue and for me to pursue what I want to pursue.
Yep.
And what has been lost is the respect I hold for you to pursue what you want to pursue and for me to pursue what I want to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
The concept is still there, but the respect is lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's no respect for it. And so I think that's ultimately the flaw in what is Western civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think civilization all over, but I would say specifically in Western civilization, is we no longer hold respect for each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's become to the point where you are so free to pursue what you want to pursue that means you don't have to respect me.
Mm-hmm.
Which, according to the concept. Is accurate, but at the same time, I think it's unjust.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not allowing you to do what you want to do, and I'm not respecting that,
yes,
then I therefore am being unjust to you. I'm not allowing you the pursuit.
So it's the difference between respecting your beliefs and respecting your beliefs that you shouldn't respect my beliefs, if that makes sense. Right? So a Muslim can immigrate to America, but a Muslim who wants to kill people who are Muslims can't immigrate to America. Right? So that's because we have things like freedom of religion and freedom of association and all these great things in the United States, these freedoms that we enjoy that are just that. They're freedoms. They're things we get to do because we're free people.
Exactly.
But if your ideology teaches that you shouldn't be allowed to do that, then you're not compatible. Now that becomes something I don't have to respect. Now you've passed out of the we can all be together and respect other people's views and talk about them and be living in a civilized society, and you've gone outside of that circle to everyone else is wrong, I'm right, and you have to believe what I believe, or I'm going to be violent against you. Right? So by the time you're out of that circle, people inside the circle, just because they're respecting of other people's beliefs, don't have to respect people's beliefs that are outside the circle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So inherently respecting other people's beliefs is only good so long as their beliefs are worth respecting.
I think the word you want to use is just.
Okay, yeah.
I think I think you need to look at, is it a just belief or is it unjust in its sense? I that's scripturally what it is.
Okay.
If you look at what the Bible teaches, when we take a stand, when we stepped up, is when injustice is in place. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think if you're living your life that way, then that's essentially what you are saying, is when an injustice is in place, is when you're allowed to take a stand and be like, you're not allowed in this circle.
Right.
Because you do not respect
what's happening in the circle.
What is good and right, and helpful and beneficial. You want to destroy that. That's an injustice. That's a breach of what God created to be. And that's where we draw that line. So that's where I think the injustice is what you're drawing the line on. Right. Are you just or are you unjust? Because that's going to let you in or keep you out. And if you're just seeking, even if your belief system does not match ours, if you believe in another God, if your ultimate pursuit is not to be harmful, that's still a just intent. And so come on in.
So then you've got truth and biblical Christianity. Then you've got free association and freedom of religion in the United States, essentially libertarianism. Right. And then you've got radical Islamists and communists and people like that.
Radical democracies. Because radical democracies exist.
And they're just as bad as...
And they're just as
democracy
destructive.
in and of itself isn't even something that you should be celebrating.
Right. It's just as destructive as communism or radical Islam.
Or at least it has the potential to be.
Right. And so I think that's where I think Trump had a point, because he said that we will keep out and stomp out all radical ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
And that is accurate. I believe as America that is important, is that I don't care what your belief is, but if your belief drives you to a point to destroy other people and their livelihoods, you don't belong.
Yep.
You're radical, you're destructive, you're evil, and I don't agree with that.
Yep.
Hitler founded his entire belief system on Christianity, but that is not even close to what Christianity is, because Christianity does not destroy, it builds up.
Yep.
And so, right there, you may say one thing and say you agree with me, but you better sure as heck believe I'm not standing by you in that. And that was what Dietrich Bonhoeffer warred against, was not the fact that Hitler was saying this, but that what Hitler claimed was not matching what God wanted. And so Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a pacifist, was willing to initiate and work a plot to assassinate Hitler because evil existed and that evil was destroying the good that God desired.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you. I think that was good. I think we should wrap it up on that, though. So thanks again.
Should we make some BLTs with mayonnaise?
BLTs with mayonnaise, yeah.
Let's do it.
You didn't work that in very well.
That
doesn't count. I guess you did. Thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate it. Like and subscribe. Thanks for being with us. We'll do it again sometime. See you later. If you like our content, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. I literally just did that.
Woo!
I said though.
Stop. Listen, it is so easy. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
That's what I did.
Watch our other videos.
That's what I did.
That was horrible. Do better.
Do I walk off? You can do whatever.
I mean, now that you said that.
Do you want to sit back down and walk off and I'll leave with you?
Okay. See ya.
That's gonna be a good blooper.
Mayonnaise! No.
Mayonnaise.
But yeah.
Right, guys. Welcome back. Thanks for being here. Jeremy, thanks for having me. We gotta restart this. Come on, real quick. Just one more time. Just one time.
Here we go. 3, 2.